Hello and welcome to Prostate Cancer Uncensored, a podcast produced by Zero the End of Prostate Cancer. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Bayer. Today, we continue our conversation with Twisted Sisters JJ French. French is a rocker, an author, and a prostate cancer survivor. In part 3 of our conversation, JJ shares his message to men battling prostate cancer. He also takes our Truth or Twisted pop quiz. Plus, we talk to Dr. Nilay Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi breaks down the numbers when it comes to your Psa Test. And now, Zero's CEO and president, Jamie Burse, talks with JJ French from JJ's home in Manhattan.
You've been good in keeping tabs on your health. You've run a couple marathons.
I don't drink, I don't smoke. I walk 5 miles every day. That's just, so I leave, so if I'm going to die a horrible death, it's not fair. I mean, like Keith Richards, like how the hell is he still going on? Everybody wants to know what Keith's secret is. I want to party that heavily and still be floating around. So I don't think I can do much more for my health than what I'm doing, which is regulate your diet, stay at a certain weight, exercise every day.
Yeah, part of keeping up on your health is keeping an eye on your PSA. Well, and that over the years, and that's what led you to get your prostate.
Yeah, I go to doctors on a regular basis, and years ago there was a 80s rock festival in Mexico, and I'm in the dressing room with all these 80s metal bands, and the conversation, if you could listen to the conversation, was like, what's your thyroid count, what's your PSA, what's your blood pressure? I mean, this is not conversations we had in the 80s. It really is like a waiting room in Boca in a way. That's where we're all headed. So if you can maintain a certain sense of humor about it, you're better off.
So let's pretend for a second, everybody who's listening in on us, we're all in the waiting room in Boca. What do you have to say to the men listening right now in terms of early detection? Well,
you get your blood test every year. If your PSA is above 4, now this is an interesting controversy because in Europe, they don't recognize PSA. They don't think that that's an important number. And it's controversial. It is truly controversial. But if your PSA is over 4 and they'll do a digital exam of the finger to see if the prostate feels hard, that's an issue. But if it's over 4, I would say get an MRI first and see what's looking there. But you got to be on top of it. I mean, you can't let it go. You really can't, because all of a sudden, if your PSA is 4 and then it's 5, 3 months later or 6, you got a problem on your hands. And the faster you deal with it, right now there's ablation treatments for those of you who don't know. Ablation treatments are the latest technology, but only if they catch it really early. What they do is if they can find that there's a single prostate cancer nodule in your prostate, they can go in there, target it in an office and blast it out with radio waves to destroy it. Now, the good news is that they can do that. That's the good news. The bad news is it doesn't stop prostate cancer. It just means that you just destroyed that cell. Well, if you talk to enough guys with prostate cancer, they'll tell you that when they did the biopsy of the prostate, they found multiple tumors in the prostate, in the quadrants of the prostate, which I asked my urologist the last time I saw him, have you had a recidivism in the ablation prostate process? In other words, have you ablated a prostate and then have another cell come up a year later? And he said, yes, it has happened. But at least if you can just stay on top of that and they never get any bigger than that, that's just in-office procedure where they just blast out the cell and they kill it, and there's no medication involved, there's no particular operation involved, and there's no sexual dysfunction involved. So that's the easy way. Also, the younger you are, the earlier they detect it with Cyberknife, from what I understand, has less of a problem in terms of urinary problems and sexual problems. However, I had a friend with Cyberknife who's my age, who had all the same problems I did. So the Cyberknife did not stop him from having urinary problems and sexual dysfunction. However, he's modest, and he wouldn't tell me if he had sexual dysfunction prior to the operation. So there's no way of me knowing that one thing led to the other, because he would talk about it to a degree, but then when I would ask him specific questions about sexuality, he wouldn't answer those questions. So men don't like talking about that stuff. They just really don't. I mean, let me couch this. It's a tough subject with some men, Some of my male friends have been free with their discussions with it, totally. But for the most part, I notice a reticence to discuss that aspect of it.
Yeah, it feels like it's been coming along now in the last couple of decades that I've been involved in the cause, but still have a long ways to go there. Now, what would you say to those who are listening who are currently fighting the disease? We talked about what your advice would be around PSA testing or rising PSA. Now those who are currently in treatment or those who are fighting prostate cancer now, what would you have to say to them?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when I hear this, he's been battling prostate cancer. You hear that phrase. Would you explain to me what that means? Does that mean that someone is being treated by radiation and they have they're like stage 4 and they're trying everything? Would that be applicable to people like that? Because I don't regard what I do as battling prostate cancer.
Sure.
I just regard I had prostate cancer, I had an operation, and if something happens, I'll get radiation. Am I then battling it, or is that used to describe a different form of dealing with prostate cancer? So I would like some help in that.
Yeah, sure. I can answer that. I think it all depends upon an individual's mindset around if they feel like they're battling disease or battling cancer versus living with it. I think it depends on what mindset they're in a particular point of time in their cancer journey. So if they're having a rough go of it or having one treatment after another to treat their prostate cancer, they might consider themselves in a battle now, where others might say, be more in a spot of zen about it, of, I'm living with prostate cancer and, all I can do is the best that I can in any given moment. So I think it comes down to whatever mindset an individual's in. So we can replace, either one, whether it's advice to men who feel like they're battling prostate cancer or those more men who are living with prostate cancer now. Any words of wisdom to them or any thoughts?
Well, may the force be with you. I mean, if all of a sudden I was faced with a recurrence, okay, and that recurrence forced me to take a certain journey with radiation for 40 treatments, I guess during that period of time, I would be, quote, battling prostate cancer. So I'm assuming that people who are battling it are being told by the doctors that there's a pathway for them to survive it, and that it may be tough or, but there's a pathway, as opposed to just accepting it as a final diagnosis that you're going to die. In an effort to not have me battle it again, I stay on top of it by getting a blood test every 3 months, so that if something is there, I will deal with it immediately, so that if it's salvageable and it saves my life, it will save my life. I can tell you that my friends who went back and had radiation never complained to me about being tired. They weren't on chemo, but let's be clear about this. They just did radiation. So I'm assuming perhaps that if you're doing chemo and chemo makes you very tired, maybe you would interpret it as battling because, you're trying to get out of bed in the morning and you just can't face the day. So maybe that description of what you are doing, you're doing. But there is no other way to handle it other than staying on top of it. So if you've had it, stay on top of it. If you're being treated for it, pay attention to your doctor. I don't know much more I can say about that, except that I hope that whatever it is that has affected you is curable.
Right. And I'll just add that all the time they're coming out with new treatments for prostate cancer, particularly advanced prostate cancer. Just in the last 10 years.
Well, the Cyberknife is one. The Ablation is another. I mean, of course, we're going to continue to move forward. And maybe one day we will get to the end of prostate cancer, which is the whole point of this thing. It's to make sure that it doesn't kill you any longer. So if it comes up, they can either prevent it or they can deal with it right away. So yeah, that's our hope, that every year you stay alive is another year closer to a cure. That's the case with all these diseases. Listen, my AFib was cured by an operation that didn't exist 5 years before my operation. It was an open heart surgery operation. It wasn't through catheters. It was a space age operation that saved my life that did not exist before I had that operation. So yes, and I'm sure, and that was 15 years ago. So I'm sure that operation is 15 years further into its sophistication. So it's even less invasive. A friend of mine who's a surgeon said to me, in 100 years from now, doctors are going to go, they used to open you up for that, and I believe and I believe in that. They used to open you up for that, before there were antibiotics, you used to die of infections. You don't anymore. So I have an enormous amount of faith in the medical community, but you have to use it. And if you live in a major city, take advantage of it. One of the beauties, one of the things about prostate cancer, like breast cancer, heart disease, these are big diseases affecting millions. So there are centers around. But if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer, my suggestion is try to find the best doctor you can. There's no replacement for a great doctor, because that great doctor may be able to give you advice that you heretofore would not have thought about, that could have made your dealing with this thing a lot easier.
That's right. And I know, talking to a lot of patients, and a piece of advice that I give is, make sure that you're patient number 50, 60,000 that is having the procedure done, rather than toward the beginning.
Listen, my first heart operation, which they almost killed me, I was the 28th person. When I had it done at Cleveland Clinic 3 years later, I was like the 5,000th guy. It was like a car wash there. Do you know what I mean? They just jump on the gurney, let's get them in, get them out. And there's a huge difference. So I lived in New York City and thought that I went to the greatest doctor in the greatest hospital. But after it failed the first time, I spoke to a guy who had the same condition I did. And I said, why did you pick Cleveland Clinic? And he said, well, I did a lot of research and I wanted the guy that did like 5,000 of them to do me. And I went, that's logic right there,
Right.
That's perfect.
Sure.
So you're 100% correct that way.
Absolutely. JD, you up for a game?
Go.
All right. We're going to play a game called Truth or Twisted. Down for this?
We'll find out.
Find out. All right. JJ, you've obviously become somewhat of an expert on prostate cancer from going through it in your journey and learning from so many others, as well as the doctors. And in an effort to educate some of our listeners, let's play Truth or Twisted, and see if we get these questions right.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right.
Truth or Twisted. Most men find out they have prostate cancer because they suffer from erectile dysfunction that prompts them to go see the doctor.
Wow. That's an interesting question.
Most men are finding out about prostate cancer because they have symptoms.
Yeah, they have symptoms. That's a great question. The guy I know who died had no symptoms whatsoever. I know several people who died with no symptoms whatsoever. So I think most people who find out they have prostate cancer find out too late. I don't know if necessarily those issues, I really don't know that answer. I would think that it would be nice to know that that's what drove you to the doctor, but I really don't know. Is that true? I mean, is that actually true, or is that not true? I don't know.
Is that your guess? It sounds like you're going with twisted, like that's twisted.
Yeah, I would say that's twisted and not true.
All right, I'm going to give it to you. You're absolutely right. During the early stages of prostate cancer, it's twisted. There are no symptoms. Early stages of prostate cancer. That's why screenings and yearly checkups are critically important to catching cancer, particularly prostate cancer, early before it spreads outside of the prostate to the rest of the body. So in other words, you may not have symptoms at all, and cancer may be detected during a general checkup that you go see your primary care physician and then do PSA check and then do the physical exam, the DRE, like we talked about. And they end up finding out that you have an elevated PSA or a suspicious physical exam, and that starts you on the pathway to see if...
by the way, folks, DRE is digital rectal exam, and you should be aware of that, what that is. That's with the finger in your butt. They feel it and they can tell. They feel it. If it's hard, that's not a good sign. That's something you should be aware of.
And it's not something to fear either. Let's not fear the finger, right? AJ,
no, and that takes 2 seconds, and it's not. No, I mean, none of it is fear if you're prepared and understand it. But again, most people don't go to dentists either. Okay.
Right.
Because they don't deal with dental pain or they don't want to know about it. So.
Right. And trust me, guys, the dentist's fingers are in your mouth far longer than the doctor's finger is checking for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
We can both attest to that. So just get it done. Put aside the excuses. All right, you're 1 for 1.
Go.
1 for 1. All right, next one. Truth or twisted? Prostate cancer is really an older man's disease. So only men in their golden years really need to worry
That's
about.
twisted. That's not true. I had too many friends who were young with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You said that you knew somebody who was 40 away from it, right?
Yeah, 40. A couple of guys, 38 and 40. So yeah, the myth that it's old man, no, not true.
Yeah, absolutely right. It is twisted. It's true that the vast majority of men with prostate cancer are over 50, and a significant majority are even over the age 65. But there are many cases of prostate cancer in men in their 20s and 30s, and of course in their 40s.
And if you're diagnosed then, you have a much better chance of coming out of it with no long-term effects. That's something that they need to understand as well. If you're diagnosed early and you have it early, you stand a much better chance of coming out of it with less problems.
Yeah, and it's really important to keep on top of it if you've got family history and you're younger, because those who are younger have, seeing more of a chance of getting aggressive prostate cancer if it starts growing, if you have it diagnosed at an early age. All right, you're 2 for 2. You're rocking it.
Okay.
Truth or twisted? JJ French is not only a rock star, he's an author of a new book about business. Is that right?
Oh, that is true.
Not twisted.
Yeah,
right.
that is true. Yeah, the book Twisted Business, my life lessons and life lessons to the history of rock and roll, and my history of rock and roll is the book that's coming out September 21st. So it's a business book. Actually, I coined a new word for the book. It's a bizwar. And what is a bizwar? You know what a rom-com is? It's a romantic comedy. A bizwar is a business memoir. So it is, and many business books are really bizwars, because how can you write a business book about your life without it being a memoir? Because basically your life is what imbues your lessons in life. So, but it is the world's first official bizwar.
What, without giving away any of the book or too much of the book, JJ, what's your favorite business tip in your biz world?
Well, I discussed the twisted method of reinvention, and that's TWISTED. I use the letters because it's easy, and my chapters are based upon the letters. TWISTED, which is tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. And that's what I teach when I do my motivational speaking and my keynote speeches. And basically, I've been turned down more times than a bedsheet in a whorehouse and come back more times than Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. So the story of how I personally and how the band has gone through hell and come back is the story. So it's one of those things where you read it and you go, wow, whoa. You know, when I do my keynote speeches, I'm hired by corporations to discuss challenges, and how do you deal with challenges, because all business has challenges. It's just rock and roll is a sexy business. So people want to hear how I did it through rock and roll. But the rules of success are the same, whether you're selling shoes or selling rock and roll. It's the same business. It's the same thing. So I teach you how to deal with the challenges, the crises, the challenges, the catastrophes of life and business.
What's one of your favorite examples that you have in there?
Oh boy, there's so many. I mean, there's a documentary for those who, you can still find it online, called We Are Twisted Fucking Sister. By the way, that's the documentary. And that documentary tells the story of the first 10 years of the band and what the band really had gone through. So I discuss the issues involved in the constant turnover of band members. So it was the band that made it, that everybody knows exists, is the 14th version of the band. So having lived through all those previous versions and having gone through what we went through in terms of the constant failures, the constant rejections, is really what the book is about. And it goes into detail about multiple situations. And we fired band members were, the thing with the band is that the band was a straight band. The band didn't, I really hated drugs and alcohol, and I hired straight band members, and it runs counter to everybody's theory of rock and roll. Like, you get in a rock and roll party. I mean, that's why you get into the rock and roll. You don't get in rock and roll to like be, in a straight band, but that was the only way we could survive. And so I tell the story of how hard it is to find musicians who don't drink and do drugs. It's next to impossible, but it's a tough business. Very, very tough. I myself have played over 9,000 performances, and that's crazy when you think about it, over as many years as we started 48 years ago, which is crazy too. So the book really goes into so many scenarios and stories about all these things, and to break it down and find one is next to impossible, except that the story of the band's success is just huge. So, I would say when the band, I had to file for bankruptcy in 1989 due to multiple lawsuits, and I was, and here I was 3 years after being in one of the biggest bands in the world, and basically I was being sued for millions of dollars, and I had to file bankruptcy. And I remember the judge looking at me and going, so you have one asset, that's the Twisted Sister trademark. So why shouldn't I take that from you? And I said, well, because it's worthless today. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, it's worthless. I said, nobody cares about the band 1989, and it's over. I said, but in 10 years, maybe Tide Detergent will want to use our music for a TV commercial. And I came up with that idea because about 6 months prior to that, I was in England and saw a Tide commercial in which they used Stand By Me, I think, by Benny King. And the song went back to #1 inexplicably, because that's just England's bizarreness as a country. And I said, well, maybe Tide Detergent will use our song and we'll come back. And I said, if that happens, I want to put the band back together. And maybe if that happens, I'll have a kid. Maybe if that happens, I'll have enough money to put my kid through college. And he went, okay, it sounds like a good enough reason. So he let me keep the name. 10 years to the month of that statement, Comtrex nasal spray license, we're not going to take it. And now for any of the people who listen to this will understand that I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It are the two most licensed heavy metal songs in history. More TV shows, commercial soundtracks. So, it was visionary on my part to say what I said. Mm-hmm. And it was ballsy to say what I said because I had no guarantee it was going to happen, but it did.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Even my youngest kid, who's 11, and I told my kids that we're going to have this talk today, and I'm like, their songs, and so I played "I Want to Rock," and he was, I know that from SpongeBob. So even my youngest,
yeah.
Everybody knows you guys.
Yeah, well, 2 years ago, NPR had the top 30 songs that unite Americans. There was the 4th of July, and Born in the USA was there. If I Had a Hammer was on the list. Blown in the Wind was on the list. We were number 3. We were the highest rock song on that list of 30. So we were in a good company of classic anthems.
You talk about all the rejections that Twisted Sister went through, at least early on, and really the resilience. It sounds like a lot of resilience has gotten built up in you over the years to the point where you are a motivational speaker. And then thinking about prostate cancer, do you feel like your experience that you went through in the early days of Twisted Sister and some of these rejections that you went through built up some of your resilience when you got told you had prostate cancer? Of like, I've heard, maybe not worse, but I've heard some pretty bad shit in my days. So I'm not gonna take it.
Well,
I mean, you pun there.
I mean, yes. I was involved in drug overdoses, near murders on a number of occasions, and drug deals. So do I look at all that and go, I'm a lucky guy? Or I talked my way out of drug busts. I could have had a record, could have had a police record, could be dead. There were a lot of things that could have happened to me. And every one of them, as each one of these issues came up and they were dealt with, every time I dealt with them successfully, it built on the next one. So I have a history of being able to survive this stuff, but it doesn't come cheap, and it came with a lot of pain. I mean, I have 37 gold and platinum albums, okay, as a manager, producer, executive producer from projects, whatever. And I had them all in a room one day, and they were all up on a wall. They were my ego wall, so I could feel better about myself. I put them all up, and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking, and I go, wow, how impressive. That's really great. thinking to myself, wow, look, Then I thought the price I paid for that success, and the price I paid was overwhelming. And I don't know, I'm not going to say I don't know if it was worth it, but let's just say that there was no way I could have ever anticipated the price that one had to pay to have that. Because, when I saw the Beatles on TV, I was 11 years old, and I went, oh my God, that's what I want to be. And if somebody had put their hand on my shoulder at that very moment on February 9th, 1964, and said, okay, John, you will be a quote rock star and you have a gold record. And I'd say, really, when? In 5 years? They said, no, 20 years and 6 months from now. I may have gone, are you out of your freaking mind? Mm-hmm. So all the decisions I made, all those years of living in ignorance, not knowing ignorance is bliss, is all part of the journey. Also, I went through some very, very tough psychological times. I contemplated suicide. It's in the book. Every one of these issues I confronted and survived it. So I guess you just build on all of it. So when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I went, yep, another challenge, right? When I had AFib, it was like, oh, it's another challenge. My daughter had uveitis. Oh, there's another challenge. So you kind of just deal with it day by day and you get through it. And then you look back and then people go, oh man, you're so brilliant. You're a genius. The truth is, I don't know if I was smart or stupid. I don't know if I'm just stupid and lucky or smart or a combination of both, probably a combination of both. Because at any given time, anything could have happened. I could have been murdered in drug deals, put myself in some stupid situations. I almost died by accident. It could have gone the other way. I mean, this just happens in life.
Yeah.
It's all detailed in the book. Anyway, it's in Twisted Business. So people read it.
I can't wait to pick it up. When is it? And you said it's out September
21st.
21st. Yeah. I can't wait to hear more of the stories. I'm definitely picking it up. And every challenge prepares you for the next one.
You hope.
Yeah.
You really hope. I mean, there's no way of knowing where the world's going to go. So I kind of philosophically look at it like that. And I also kind of have a very broad philosophical vision, which is in 3 billion years, the sun blows up. This all disappears anyway. And we all go back to the carbon mass of humanity. So when I really get freaked out, I think about that and go, does any of it really matter? Like, how much of it matters enough to be upset about it? Does anything, you want to take a real broad look at it. Mm-hmm. Billions of years from now, the sun will dissolve and our universe will collapse and will explode out and it all starts all over again. So everything we've created here will be gone. Nice thought, but it'll all be gone. So, if you can think about that, you kind of put your problems in perspective. But I'm also fortunate enough to be able to put my problems in perspective. There's plenty of people in this world who don't and can't.
Right. Well said, JJ. Thanks for being with us today. Your voice is important, and sharing your journey with us today saves lives and encourages men to not only get tested for prostate cancer, but keep up their prostate cancer journey or their fight, however they look at it. But just bottom line, helps save men's lives and keeps families together. Doing great work. Thank you, JJ.
Thank you for having me, and anything I can do to advance the work, I'm there. And I wish to those listening to this, dealing with it, that you follow the pathway that works for you and your family, and you make the best decisions that you can.
You're listening to Prostate Cancer Uncensored, and our guest is Twisted Sisters' JJ French, a rocker, author, and prostate cancer survivor. This episode is part of a 3-part series with JJ French, brought to you in partnership with Bayer. Head over to zerocancer.org/podcast to download and listen to all 3 episodes. And now, it's time for Zero's Ask the Doctor segment.
Hello, I'm Greg Roy, Manager of Donor and Fundraising Communications here at Zero. I'm also a prostate cancer survivor. And I want to expand on our conversations with JJ French by talking with Dr. Nilay Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi is a surgeon and urologist with Potomac Urology in the Washington, D.C. area. He is also a member of Zero's Medical Advisory Board. Earlier in the podcast, JJ mentioned some controversy over the PSA test in Europe. Dr. Gandhi, what's that about?
PSA has come under a lot of fire over these last few years. So this is dating all the way back to 2012, when there were a lot of changes that happened with PSA. And a lot of this came down to, at least in America, the United States Preventive Services Task Force that stated that PSA was not helpful. And I think that, around 2015 or so, these guidelines came out stating that it got a grade D recommendation, and it was not recommended. And the reason for that was we were seeing a lot in terms of overdiagnosis or overtreatment of prostate cancer. I think over these last, almost 5 to 7 years or so, when we look at this, there's been a significant change in terms of biomarkers, in terms of risk stratification, in terms of MRIs, in terms of biopsies, to really understand who do we need to diagnose with prostate cancer, but more importantly, who actually needs treatment. And it's to try and minimize these potential side effects. So there's a lot of studies going on looking at the utility of PSA, but more importantly, are there better tests that are available? We've always used PSA, which I think has shown a tremendous benefit in decreasing your risk of, or in increasing your probability of detecting early stage prostate cancer. What we do with that information, I think, is where we are now to really learn who truly needs treatment. So I think PSA has truly been helpful. We're looking at different ways to improve on that, to really have a great test to help identify men with prostate cancer who do require treatment.
We hear a lot of numbers when it comes to PSAs. Break it down for us. What's safe and what's not?
Historically, the cutoff number has always been 4. Routinely, I think that's what everyone has come to expect, that if my PSA is less than 4, I'm safe. If my PSA is above 4, then that's the danger zone. And again, that's not entirely accurate. We always want to look at PSA velocity. So you want to look at somebody over time and see, well, how quickly is their PSA going up? So even if I have a gentleman who has a PSA of 1, the next year it's 2, and then the next year it's 3.8. That's a quick velocity. That's doubling almost every year. And so even though it's less than 4, that's still somebody that I am concerned about. The other aspect of this is that even aggressive prostate cancers may not produce much PSA. So someone could have a normal PSA of about 1.5 and still have an aggressive cancer that is felt on the digital rectal exam. So, there's no true safe number that just says this number, below this you're fine, above this it's worrisome. It's more assessing your trend for your PSA, the prostate exam, your family history, your age. All these play a role. There's even recommendations now that if someone's PSA is above 1.5, they should be evaluated by a urologist. So there, again, I think it comes back down to individualized risk and making sure that you undergo the proper screening with a blood test, with a rectal exam, and the appropriate questions to discuss your individualized risk factors.
What is ablation treatment for prostate cancer, and who is a good candidate for it?
Ablation treatment is something that's somewhat up and coming in terms of looking at focal therapy. So as we talk about these different prostate cancer treatments, we're looking at prostatectomy, where we remove the entire prostate. We're talking about radiation therapy, where we actually are radiating the entire prostate. And that's where some of these side effects can come in. Incontinence, erectile dysfunction are all due to these whole gland treatments. Ablative techniques are trying to focus on focal therapy or hemigland, half of the prostate treatment. So I think as we become more specialized here, especially with the utility of prostate MRIs, of targeted prostate biopsies, we're really looking at these ablative techniques to provide focal therapy. And there's numerous different versions that are available at the moment. There's one utilizing ultrasound. It's called high intensity focused ultrasound, or HIFU. There's laser ablative techniques. There's cryotherapy or freezing techniques. So there's different aspects that we're using to try and investigate this. And a lot of it is still looking at clinical stages, trying to identify that, is this truly an appropriate treatment modality? But I do think that we are moving in this direction, and hopefully that will become the future for prostate cancer management if we're able to treat specific areas confidently rather than treating an entire prostate. But we're not 100% there, but we are moving in that direction.
We talked about Cyberknife treatment in the first episode of this series, so let's discuss the side effects. What are they? And I'm guessing not every man's side effects are the same.
Yeah, everyone, it varies. And, Cyberknife, similar to these ablative techniques, it's trying to do targeted and focused treatment to destroy the cancer, but minimize potential side effects. However, there's always the possibility for potential side effects. And those side effects, typically when they involve the prostate, revolve around incontinence, leakage of urine, or erectile or sexual dysfunction. Now, there are always possibilities with radiation of having what's called rectal toxicity, where the rectum may get impacted by the radiation as well. And there's different things that we do now to minimize that, where we put in a spacer gel to separate the prostate from the rectum to try and minimize that. So there are always possible side effects to the prostate, the bladder, and surrounding organs, namely the rectum, that's associated with any type of radiation therapy, but it tends to be lower there with Cyberknife. But you also have to take into account patients' risk factors as well. So their age can play a role in terms of incontinence, as well as erection issues. Their prostate size can play a role. If they've had previous procedures, that can play a role. So multiple comorbidities and factors can also impact potential side effects as we go through treatment.
Dr. Gandhi, you have the last word. As a doctor, your message to men listening today is?
I commend JJ for being able to speak about this, because it does make a difference. And I think people listening realize that this is a disease state that can affect anybody. However, if caught early, it's very curable. And I think, my message to everybody is to make sure you get screened, to get checked, be your own advocate, talk to your primary care doctors, speak with a urologist, assess your own individualized risk, that if you have a family history, if you're African American, if you're above the age of 55, all these things can be considered risk factors, that it's worth having that conversation, that a simple blood test and a digital rectal exam could potentially save your life. So I would honestly recommend everyone to have that conversation with their primary care doctor or with their urologist, and to get screened and to get checked early.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for your time and insight. Again, Dr. Gandhi is a surgeon and urologist with Potomac Urology in the Washington, D.C. area.
You've been listening to Prostate Cancer Uncensored, a podcast produced by Zero, the End of Prostate Cancer. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Bayer. Head over to zerocancer.org to learn more about prostate cancer, Zero's programs, and to download more podcasts.